Okay, welcome everybody. Um, Today we have Tovin. He is from OpenRouter, and he is our guest speaker. Oh, there we go. You can turn on your mic.
Hello, hello, everyone. Pleasure to be
Hey,
here.
thanks for joining us.
Of course. Hello, everybody
So
in the chat. Thanks for saying hi.
I'm not sure if other people here use OpenRouter or are familiar with them. I'm sure that you're familiar with them. You want to tell us a little bit about what you guys do and why people use you instead of just going direct to Anthropic or OpenAI.
That's a great question. Um, OpenRouter's pitch is actually we have a fancy new website, and I'm going to steal the language directly. Not a new website, a new homepage, I should say. But I'm going to steal the language directly from our homepage. Our pitch is we're the unified interface for LLMs. We give you better prices, better uptimes with no subscription. Specifically for an app like Roo Code, which we're big fans of, and happy that you guys are happy with the service. Um, when you're using upstream providers directly, like Anthropic or OpenAI or Google, there's a lot of setup time involved with those APIs, whether it's setting up a billing account with Google or trying to negotiate your rate limits with Anthropic's tiers. The goal of OpenRouter is to make that much easier for the end user, abstract that away. We take care of it for you. We reduce the friction from giving somebody your money and using LLMs. Specifically with OpenRouter, I think the common thing is the rate limits are pretty tricky. You have to put in a certain amount of money, wait a certain amount of time, request a rate limit increase. With OpenRouter, generally speaking, that isn't an issue. We, at this point, have very healthy relationships with a lot of our upstream providers and are able to negotiate on your behalf while also providing you, this unified interface where you don't have to worry about vendor lock-in. You can switch models in one line. This is an industry where, 1 week GPT 4.1 is the top model, and maybe next week Gemini 2.5 Pro goes general availability. The amount of time it would take to switch between the two of those and get the rate limits you want, and maybe you put in a bunch of OpenAI money. You can't use that in Google. So removing all of those layers of friction and ensuring that you want to use your AIs, you can do it in one spot easily, manage your billing, manage your rate limits as best you can think to do so.
Mhm. Well, thank you. I think that's a pretty clear answer. I think we have some questions going on here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pull them up. In the meantime, do you want to give us some insight on these stealth models of yours? This was the
Yeah.
talk of the town. I mean, you guys really. I didn't see OpenRouter tweeted about or talked about that much. People would say it like a necessary evil, and I think that has changed quite a bit. And those stealth models have really given new light to
Yeah.
how you guys are presented. I think, but
I'd have to agree for sure. I mean, I think I'm just going to keep using the word industry to talk about all of these different AI creators and providers. For the most part, we just get model drops, and there isn't really a way to mess with them prior, unless you are LM Sys or LM Arena. Nobody had really ever been given access to models prior to release. It was always, maybe you got a LM Arena random selection of a model that had a code name, but we never really typically found out, who was behind those models or even when they launched, which models were which. And of course, it's limited to a chat where, the only thing you can do is put text in and get text out. It's not the full API interface. There's not a lot you can do there. You can't hook up LM Arena to your Roo Code interface to try out the fresh new, you know, I'm a
mhm,
good chatbot v2 like we saw with OpenAI a while ago.
yeah,
So from our perspective, from on the OpenRouter team, it has always been, kind of a dream goal to get enough provider trust to have somebody be willing to to trial a model with us. We thought, a little selfishly, a little tooting our own horn, that having a trial run through our API would give the model creators and the community a much better sense of a model's capabilities, its success cases, its failure states, what it can do, what it can't do. Just all this range of feedback that doesn't really exist within just a chat room. Unfortunately, I think we've especially seen that with the Llama 4 release and the fact that Meta provided a chat fine tune for the LLM Arena. I think unfortunately really they took a little bit of a hit there. But yeah, it's always been a dream goal of ours. I think it's seemed pretty obvious to us that if anybody had ever trusted us with it, it would be a pretty big moment for OpenRouter.
Mhm.
And this one definitely kind of came out of nowhere. We recently had been discussing, okay, we are at a stage where we think we have the leverage, we have the users, we have the, usage. We're doing 2 trillion tokens per week on the platform. Likely we'll just keep increasing from here.
Mhm.
There's a lot of usage on the platform. There's a lot of a variety of users. If anybody tries to do this with us, we think that it is going to be a success. Regardless of who does it or how we do it, they're going to get enough data that it's going to be a success. So our thinking was, let's go try to convince providers to do it with us.
Yeah.
Before we got a chance to actually go and push on anybody or figure that out, it actually just kind of came to be that
Hmm.
OpenAI wanted to talk to us about this. And I
Yeah.
will be a little vague here. There's, don't want to risk any of these relationships. But we were given this opportunity to release or allow usage of Quasar Alpha and later Optimus Alpha to our
Mhm.
community via our API. And that's, that was a really exciting moment. The kind of alarm bells rung. It's go time. We have this opportunity. Obviously, we didn't have it for that long. It was about 2 weeks prior to GPT 4.1 release that we had this opportunity. So it was all hands on deck. How do we make it so that our unified API, which already abstracts all these upstream API differences, how do we make sure that we keep the model secret?
Mhm.
Was one of the biggest questions, right? We don't want it to be 100% guaranteed obvious that it was OpenAI. Of course, the nerdier people in the AI scene would be able to tell the differences between tokenization and tool calling shapes and all these kinds of things that ended up popping up on Twitter that we knew were likely to happen. But we did do our due diligence. We obfuscated the error shapes. We changed the IDs in the messages. We did a couple of things here and there just to make sure
That
that,
must have been quite a undertaking, especially if it was, not planned months in advance.
right. Yeah, we did that in about 24 hours from being given the go live to how do we make sure we don't leak it ourselves and ruin this opportunity. It was a hectic 24 hours with a lot of double and triple checking and making sure that, you know, there wasn't any dead giveaways for OpenAI.
Yeah.
So,
Huh.
we got this opportunity. We rushed to make sure that we could do it in a stealth format. We double, triple checked and figured out the comms. And yeah, we took it live and we were so happy with the community reception. We were ecstatic. We were extremely excited. We thought this was going to be an amazing opportunity. But we also weren't really sure what the community was going to think, if it was even going to be used, if the model was necessarily any good. We didn't even have time to really test the model ourselves because we just wanted it out. Like we knew
Yeah.
we couldn't
I
miss
mean,
this opportunity.
you knew it was gonna be quality, but yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's coming from OpenAI. They've had a pretty solid track record of, um, uh, you know, at best they release something that's a little better, but they
Sure.
don't, you know, they're bound to leapfrog over and over.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the 1 million context window was already enough of a surprise. Um, don't regardless of the speed at which the responses were happening and the fact that this was a model from a lab that was going to be completely free for API use, meaning all of these different use cases like Roo Code and all these different apps that we have on the platform, we're essentially just going to be able to get free intelligence for 2
Yeah,
weeks. That's awesome.
yeah.
So Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I think
good job on
that
that.
about does it on the how it happened, but happy to keep talking about any specific questions or anything.
Somebody said, does OpenRouter have more stealth models lined up? And are they talking with other providers to potentially be the stealth model company, I guess?
You know, I won't confirm or deny either of those questions specifically. That being said, it is obviously the intention of ours for this to continue to happen. We think Quasar and Optimus Alpha were an astounding success, and it is our opinion, and we believe OpenAI shares, or at least might share this opinion, that it was a very good way to collect feedback and collect data on how the model performs and behaves. So it is definitely going to be the intention that if anybody is interested in doing this with us, we are going to be gun-ho and ready to help them and ready to give them as much data and feedback as we can possibly provide. Because at the end of the day, if this really is working and if the data we're collecting makes the models better, then everyone wins.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Okay, another one. Why are we getting messages? Oh, my little chat bot here just overwrote something. Why are we getting messages that we are able to get 1,000 requests per day at Gemini 2.5 if we top up, but we're still getting rate limited, somebody said.
Yeah, this is a very good question. Actually, something we were just discussing this morning. I believe it's a pretty high priority issue for us at OpenRouter. I'll give it some context. Gemini 2.5 Pro came out from Google and it blew all the benchmarks out of the water. It is a Sonnet 3.7 level model, if not better, in a lot of programming benchmarks. It is a reasoning model, so it also does really well in math and logic and reasoning related issues. And I don't think anybody was ready for it to have as much demand. And when I say anybody, I include Google. So we are specifically talking about Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental. From Google, experimental models are always free, but they have a very limited capacity. They have very low rate limits. I believe the current rate limits are 25 requests per day from Google directly, with up to 1 million tokens per day. If you know
Mhm.
anything about how many tokens these models use and how many requests you might use per day, that's a very, very low number. Um,
Yes.
so thanks to OpenRouter's incredible relationships with our providers, we actually have a much higher rate limit for the Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental model.
Yeah.
I think our number is around 10 million tokens per minute, and we don't have a request per day limit on OpenRouter as a platform. I'm not talking about the user here. That being said, even with that pretty insane capacity number, there is so much demand for the model. There is 2 to 5 times more requests made to the model per minute than OpenRouter can reasonably serve. That is even with our own rate limiting placed on top, which is currently 1 request per minute and 80 requests per day. All this technical jargon set aside, OpenRouter is basically in a situation where we can't serve people who want to use it. There's a 50-50 chance that your request will go through to Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental. And because we have set an additional rate limit on top, there is now a confounding variable where, kind of separately from Gemini 2.5, we made a change on our end to allow people to add 10 credits to their OpenRouter account to then get 1,000 requests per day across all of our free models. This happened regardless of any model release. This happened because we were getting inundated with a lot of free model abuse. There were a lot of accounts being created on the platform that were unfortunately not legitimate humans. They were just spam accounts being created to take advantage of our previous free limit tier, which was about 200 requests per day. So we made
Hmm.
this change, right? If you didn't have any credits on your account, you got 50 requests per day. If you have at least 10 credits on the account, you get 1,000 requests per day, aggregate across all the free models. To wrap all of that up, we made this change, encouraging people to add credits to their account so they would get more free model access.
Yeah.
Unrelated to that, Gemini 2.5 Pro Free came out and blew everything out of the water. Demand skyrocketed, and we just unfortunately did not have the capacity to serve, so we added rate limits ourselves. But even with that, there just is not enough supply from Google to provide
Okay.
everybody access to this incredible model.
That makes complete sense. I personally, 2.5 is my go-to, and
Yeah,
I had to
it's a great model.
turn it off yesterday because its caching mechanism and lack of caching um, is I think it requires rather large um, chunks to
Mm,
cache, and basically ended up not caching. And I was just killing it on my wallet, so I had to dial it back a little bit. But I'm
yeah.
excited for them to put out a fully competent model because preview is pretty solid. Experimental was for a few days, and then obviously it's an experiment, so they're probably A B C D testing. I don't know exactly how all that works, and yeah, so 2.5 definitely is unbelievable. It's a great surprise because I've been, no matter what models came out, Sonnet. I would try models and then be like, okay, now I got to get work done, and I would jump back to Sonnet. So it
Yeah.
hasn't been the case since 2.5, which is wonderful to see some true competition on that front.
Yeah.
Okay, somebody said, did you guys get to name the stealth models? That was Matt, that's Mr. Ubens that said that.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. We did. We came up with the names Quasar Alpha and Optimus Alpha ourselves. Um, we did find it funny that in the last couple of days, while they were, getting ready to announce GPT 4.1, you had Sam Altman talking about quasars and making sly references, and we were kind of like, they stole our naming thunder. We were very happy with the names we picked. We definitely thought that they were catchy and mimetic, so to speak. So yeah, we took that. Honestly, the naming thing took more time than you'd like to think. But as Alex, our co-founder and CEO, even tweeted about, GPT 4.5 is actually the OpenRouter like writing LLM of choice. So a lot of our announcements, a lot of our documentation kind of goes through a GPT 4.5 pass. And
Same with
the
mine.
Quasar name, yeah, the Quasar name actually came out of some brainstorming we did with 4.5. So OpenAI named their own model, kind of, if you want to think about it that way. But Optimus was not a 4.5. Actually, Optimus was. We were trying to figure out something that wasn't obviously Quasar related because the intent was to try to make these, not obviously the same thing. We didn't necessarily want to make it, Quasar V2. So we were thinking like Greek gods, Greek myths. What can we try that's like different but still cool to write and to talk about? And we came up with Optimus. Thought Optimus Prime was probably a little too close to the copyrights, but Optimus was still pretty good.
Yeah, no, good answer. Um, somebody said that they tried Deep Coder and I don't know Optimus Alpha the other day, and something fun happened. One of the two started to deliberate endlessly statements of and then I'm wondering this and that without stopping for like 40 minutes. Any insights into why this type of thing happened? I mean, I'm bringing this question up because that's a common occurrence. It doesn't happen that often, but it happens often enough that you can read about it
Yeah.
frequently on subreddits.
Yeah, I think my guess is that that just happened on Deep Coder. A lot of these smaller models, I believe Deep Coder is a 14 billion parameter model. Correct me if I'm wrong. There is some risk of repetition. They get caught in. This applies to all LLMs, but just specifically happens more with older models or smaller models. Repetition loops, and then I'm wondering this and that is the first thing that they spit out. And then the next tokens just kind of start falling apart, the next token prediction, and you'd get these repetition loops. There are some sampling parameters you can change, specifically if your provider supports it, repetition penalty and frequency penalty specifically. Um, but for the most part, it's just kind of an artifact of specifically longer outputs. The longer an output gets, the less coherent a model gets. And if it's not a very large model, they will tend to have problems like this. I'm sure, if you tried Gemma 4B, for example, some of these smaller models, you could get this to happen pretty reproductively. But Optimus, I would be surprised to see that that be the case for it, because it is a GPT 4.1 early snapshot.
If you look at the group chat, um, I did have Gemini actually do that the other day. I put in the OpenRouter um, Roo Code group chat
Right.
where
Let me see if I
it
can
was
find that.
going and it wasn't stopping, and so I did kill it, but it was sort of funny. Uh, just
Yeah,
went back
they
and forth.
definitely it's definitely possible that all models do these. It just tends to happen quite a bit more with the smaller models, and
First and the last
you know,
time I've had it happen, to be honest. I because I use Sonnet, or have used Sonnet almost exclusively. I just don't see that type of thing that often. It has different ticks, I guess you could say.
right,
Somebody
exactly,
said,
exactly.
they said, I love OpenRouter for giving my apps and prototypes almost instant access to the new models. However, I find the overhead charges high to heavy usage. Example, productionized apps. Do you have anything it works in the works for lower costs for high usage, or are you aiming your product at rapid prototyping?
That's a good question. Let me set the stage for everybody who's now wondering, what does OpenRouter charge? The OpenRouter pricing model, the business model, is we have a flat fee percentage whenever you purchase credits, plus a flat fee is probably the wrong thing. There's a 5% fee on credit purchases, plus a 35% flat fee on top of that. Most of that,
35%?
sorry, 35 cents,
Okay.
0.35 US dollars. Yeah.
I thought I don't pay that much.
Most of that, over 50% of that, is Stripe processing fees. I think the Stripe fees is 2.9 out of the 5%, and the
Sounds
the
about right.
0.35 is also part of the Stripe cost. So OpenRouter's take is less than 2% on credit purchases.
Hmm.
Obviously, that doesn't really matter to the end user. You're paying 5% plus the 35 cents. We understand
Hmm.
that. At this time, we've had various conversations about how that fee shape might change for our like smaller users. For example, just an example, none of this is guaranteed. Don't take my word for it. Don't expect our terms of service to change to reflect this.
Hmm.
But let's say you're purchasing $20 in credit, maybe it's a 6% fee. But if you're purchasing $1,000 in credit, maybe it's a 3% fee. Likely this would only happen once we had a better negotiated deal with Stripe and we're able to, if we took a 3% fee with our current setup, OpenRouter wouldn't be making any money. In fact, we'd probably take a loss on your credit purchases, and OpenRouter might not exist for very long if that was the case. We've
Yeah.
thought about this kind of thing. On top of that, for some of our more enterprisey customers, there are folks that you might not be seeing on the app showcase because they might not necessarily be using the OpenRouter headers to publicly displayed, but there are definitely businesses, organizations, individuals that are making large credit purchase orders ahead of time. And if we do these credit purchase orders, and yeah, there you go, our beautiful new website. If you do these large credit purchase orders and you do them outside of the Stripe platform, obviously then Stripe is not taking that percentage fee on top, and we can lower that fee for you. This
Yeah.
typically is a minimum of about 10,000 in credits purchased because of the operational cost, and being such a small team, it takes some time for us to warm that muscle up and go through the process and sign the documents. And so that's how we are thinking about that. We might have a different tier structure in the future, but also
Hmm.
if you are a very high usage customer with a productized app, you can come talk to us and we can figure out if there's a large pre-purchase credit order that you can put in where we can negotiate some of those fees down if you are a large enough volume customer.
Makes sense. I guess I have a question for you then.
Sure.
You said small team. How small of a team are we talking?
We are at 8 now. That is 4 engineers, myself, the CEO and COO, and our newest hire is our head of finance. And you can thank the head of finance for allowing us to start talking about some of these rates, fee changes, because now we have the operational capacity to start handling some of these. these possibilities. In January, when I first joined, I was hire number 5. So the team is rapidly growing. We expect to continue hiring engineering capacity and maybe 1 or 2 more folks on the operational side. But we are a very small team, and our customer base is fortunately very high or very large. But that obviously comes with some scaling issues and capacity constraints, especially around support and operations.
Yeah. We have some more questions about um, there being issues with Gemini 2.5 when people have 10 plus credits. Says, are the API requests issues with Gemini 2.5 Pro, EXP, if they have 10 plus credits, are recharged? I think I understand what they mean, and I think you sort of covered that. You said that you guys are doing your best to try to keep up with the demand, but sometimes, um, yeah,
Yeah, it's tricky, right? The Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental requests that error unfortunately do count as part of the like requests per day count. That has always been the case across all of our free models, and it's kind of the core. It is the thing that happens as part of the core code base. Just because if we allowed error requests to not count against your quota, you could just spam the free models endlessly in a case like this and guarantee that your requests would go in. And that's just bad for our infrastructure, bad for the upstream platform, bad for the usage of everybody else. Gemini
yes.
2.5 is just a very difficult situation for us. We are actively trying to work out possible solutions. We were discussing just this morning, posting an announcement and getting ideas and feedback from the community. I pitched the possibility of allowing Gemini 2.5 Pro free only for people who had put in 10 credits, but that depends on what the data looks like. If, nobody's really using it that only has 0 credits, that change might not really impact anything. But yeah, just to kind of simplify the answer to that question. Yes, we are actively struggling with successful requests on 2.5 Pro experimental. There's just too much demand. You can plug in your own AI Studio API key to get a few more requests out of that model, still for free. OpenRouter won't charge you there.
Makes sense. Aside from stealth models, what else is on the roadmap for OpenRouter?
Oof, everything. Just yesterday, we did our Q2 planning, and it was about twice as long as our Q1 goals. Obviously, as
Wow.
the team is growing, there's a lot we want to do, and a lot we think is still missing from the platform. We've got things like Gemini caching support queued up. It's actually technically supported now, but because Google is in such a weird state with what is supported and what is not, we haven't quite announced it yet, but that'll be very soon. We're working on multimodality. Some keen-eyed folks might have noticed that if you go to the OpenRouter models page, you will now see input modalities as text and image, but also output modalities as text and image. The idea here being models like GPT-4.0, who have native image outputs as part of their LLM, and Gemini 2.0, maybe 2.5 now, who is a native LLM with image output modalities. That's what we're working on supporting in OpenRouter. And then another fun one that I'm super excited about is PDF support. And for PDF support, you can kind of generalize that as just general file upload support. But really, the first step to that is allowing PDF uploads to the direct upstream APIs that support it. So Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI all have their own support for sending a PDF or files through their API directly. We're going to start supporting that. But we're also going to start supporting PDF support on every model on OpenRouter. This
Hmm.
is a similar concept to the web search thing, where if you use OpenRouter, you can enable web search on every model that exists on a platform. We're going to do the same thing with PDFs, and you will be able to choose between a more basic PDF to JSON engine or Mistral's new OCR model, which has had a lot of hype for being a very good PDF parser. So we're excited about that. PDF support should be coming out hopefully this week. No promises,
Nice.
but we're actively testing the final PR and getting ready to merge and announce. But man, for Q2, that's just like our short-term plans, really. For Q2, we're thinking about things like quick sets. So how can we make it so that you can kind of customize the entire AI or API experience from a set of configurable toggles, you know, using all of the API features we already have, like sorting by throughput or max price parameters or
Mhm.
sorting, filtering out different levels of quantization. How can we make it so that you don't have to tediously manage those on the API level every time? You can configure it once and use it as simply as, for example, just as an example, changing the model name. That's just one
Yeah.
thing. Then there's a lot of hardening we want to do on the API level, and we're continuing to scale. There's continuing to be updates to the upstream API. We have OpenAI's new responses API, which is a different shape than chat completions. We want to make sure we have proper support of that and allow, new innovations
Mhm.
that might come with that. There's all these different tool calling shapes and you know slight variations that in general we are doing pretty well at, but there's always these edge cases here and there that, for a unified interface, it's definitely high on our priority to make sure that there are just as few edge cases as possible, and we make it really explicit that the experience you expect when you select a model and when you select a parameter is the same regardless of which model you pick. You shouldn't have to update your code just because Google has a slightly different tool calling response shape than Anthropic. Our goal is to handle that for you.
Mhm.
So here's
Without the quality of the output being.
exactly
Yeah.
right, right. We generally speaking, we don't really mess with the input and output very much at all. All we are
Yeah.
doing is making sure that your request is acceptable by the upstream and then converting the shape of it, not the actual output itself,
Right.
into something that is going to be quote unquote OpenAI compatible.
No,
And then
that makes
lastly, I
sense.
think something I can tease is we're starting to think about what an OpenRouter SDK might look like. Just starting to think about it, but there are things that we are now currently somewhat limited by due to the fact that we are specifically OpenAI compatible in a lot of regards.
Mhm.
So odds are we'll probably be doing some kind of public conversation about that, seeing if there's any input there, if it makes sense to do, if it doesn't make sense to do, what people are missing, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Okay, I know I said and lastly, but one last thing that I'm actually pretty excited about. We are hoping to do some kind of standardization around everybody's model's endpoint. So model endpoints don't really have a standard right now. The OpenAI one is very simplistic. There's not a lot that to show for there. And even our own model's endpoint is just not very useful. If you want to navigate to /API/v1/models, you'll be able to see it. Um, I like I like the autofill there. But yeah, go ahead and navigate to
You
that.
saw it. I
Pretty
didn't actually know. Did I have
pretty
a
print.
request in? I think I might
No,
have been looking at your guys' back end reporting. Um,
it's good. It's good. I like it. You've got a little pretty print button there if you want to click on that to make it a little bit more
oh yeah,
readable
hey, look at
in the
that.
top left.
You do. Okay.
Um, so this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the models endpoint. How do the upstream providers tell us about their models, and how does OpenRouter ingest it? We're
Okay.
working to standardize this to make it so that now that we have 50 plus API providers on the platform, how do we reduce the friction for when they want to add a new model, when they want to change context lengths, when they want to update the quantization or update the pricing, or maybe they want to change how many images they accept or whether or not they accept images? Right now, the way we do this is we have a monitor on all of these different APIs that we get alerted if things change. The problem is, nobody is really telling us all the nitty gritty details. For example, Llama 4 came out, and we were continuously getting pinged from our monitors that, hey, Samba Nova has Llama 4 now, or, Together has Llama 4 now. And we set up the model, but then we have to go and ask, hey, does this endpoint support tool calling? Do you have vision capabilities? How many images can we send? How are you tokenizing the image? What's the max price? And this is just this operational friction where, yes, we move quickly, but it requires both us and the provider to be willing to and have that data on hand right away. So, how can we
Yeah.
standardize the model's API to benefit OpenRouter, but also to benefit the user so that the endpoint you're hitting just makes, you know what it can do, what the pricing is, all the nitty gritty details, so that we can make it even easier to onboard new providers, to onboard new models. Ideally, anytime one of our more open source providers adds a new model, we should have it the moment it hits their model's endpoint. Right now, that delay is about 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how fast I am, because it's currently my job to do it. But there doesn't really feel like that friction needs to exist. So that's something that seems kind of mundane to think about. What's to, but internally, we think this is going to be a very important standardization, a very important push for the industry to kind of congeal around a model's endpoint that makes a lot of sense for everybody, not just OpenRouter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Someone said currently Llama 4 Scout is provided with a max context window of around 500K tokens, although the model itself supports up to 10 million tokens. Do you think that any providers will start providing any large context windows in the near future? And I guess in this case, uh, what are your guys' plans for that?
Yeah, so this is more so on the provider side than it is on the OpenRouter side, but I'm happy to answer. Offering a 10 million context window is extremely compute intensive. It requires a lot of hardware. The inference business is a very, very low margin business. Most of our providers, I maybe I shouldn't generalize that way. It's a low margin business. There's not a lot of profit involved. It is tricky to get, any kind of revenue out of it. Most of the time, these kinds of things are running at cost or with very little margin. To be able to provide an endpoint for Llama 4 Scout in this regime of already having compute scarcity and trouble finding GPUs, for a provider to be willing to commit to a 10 million context window endpoint, odds are they're going to have to provide way more compute than they'd be comfortable with. The endpoint would have to be priced pretty high, much higher than I think people would expect. And the odds that that node, that set of GPUs, would be able to serve a lot of requests is very low. So let's
Yeah.
take a specific example. If Together were to put up an endpoint for Llama 4 Scout with 10 million tokens, and they deployed a single GPU node, which might mean 16 to 32 GPUs, I'm just making up numbers here, but that's a decent chunk of their compute. That 10 million context window node might only be able to serve, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 requests per minute,
Yeah.
which is a very, very small number. Those requests might also take minutes to respond to if you are using that 10 million context window. So I think, unfortunately, just the math doesn't add up. It's going to be hard for providers to do. It's likely going to have low usage by the users. It's going to be very expensive. The requests are going to take a very long time to run. And until there's just an extreme amount of spare capacity to spend on these kinds of things, it's going to be tricky to convince anybody to specifically support that in the near future. My
Makes sense.
guess is that these kinds of deployments are going to be happening on-prem for organizations that have specific usage and are not worried about the costs involved, because they have a need for it outside of serving it as a serverless endpoint for inference.
Yeah. I I think I understand what you're saying. Sometimes all this area is moving so quickly, and there's so much to learn constantly, and then things I learn are not, they're already obsolete by the time I learn them. Sometimes, um, I don't always get what people are saying, but you seem that you simplify it in a way that you know my small monkey brain gets. So, somebody else asked. Well, two people. So Stripe makes more than you. Could you take alternate payments, crypto, for example? And I understand you guys do take crypto. And then someone else said, does OpenWriter charge percent in the crypto payments? So those are
Yeah, happy to answer that. We do have crypto as a payment option. We currently use Coinbase e-commerce platform, which does take a small fee from that. But yeah, we take crypto as payment. We charge a 5% fee. Some of that goes to Coinbase e-commerce. I'm not 100% sure what the split is there. But the crypto payment flows gives us a little bit more of that percentage. That being said, we have been advised that there are various different other options that we should be exploring, including some new primitives from Coinbase themselves that would have zero fees, both on the seller and the buyer. We're considering these things, and if there is a way for us to reduce the fees that we have to spend on
Yeah.
these kinds of crypto payments, then odds are we are going to reduce the fee on the user for alternate payments like crypto.
Yeah.
It's definitely not our goal to like increase any of these fees in any way. It's just it's been what they've been since we were a very small company and a very small team. And now that we are growing bigger and bigger and have the leverage and have the, wiggle room to mess with these fees, they will likely be going down. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. Um, there are so many questions, more than I anticipated. Um, someone said,
It's good
first,
fun.
thanks for being here. You receive a lot of data from users, like which models are being used the most with Roo, right? Could that data be fed back to Roo theoretically for making recommendations to users on which models to use? Uh, it's a question that is being asked frequently, they said. Now, I would say, first off, we do have our um, analytics set up. So we have some idea of what's going on for the people that opt in. And I guess I'll pass that over to you to continue on with.
Yeah. We've thought a lot about this. I think the way OpenRouter is thinking about this kind of data and making it accessible is, you know, there's a possibility to work more directly with app platforms like Roo themselves. But also, we think it just kind of makes sense if there was a page, like if you were to click on Roo Code on OpenRouter, you could just pop it open and see all of the different models that are being used the most on Roo Code.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have that data. Yeah, we can make it available to only the app providers. We think along the lines of publishing, the global LLM usage rankings that we do on OpenRouter that we think people really like. It's a very fun chart to look at. We should be doing just kind of the same thing for apps themselves and just making that data set public. There is, of course, maybe more, I don't know, I'm not going to call it proprietary data, but other data that isn't necessarily obvious that would be easy and simple to make public, um, that we could, in theory, down the line, have a more close relationship with certain providers and help them understand that data a little better for things like prompt optimization and things like that. But that being said, by default, OpenRouter isn't really collecting prompt and response data. You have to opt into that logging. So it's not like we could just say, here's all the different requests your users made and here's how we could make them better. It's not that simple because we don't have that data. In fact, for the most part, OpenRouter is a privacy first platform. So we are going to be very careful about that kind of thing if we ever get there.
No,
But
I
yeah,
understand. Privacy is a big
yeah,
deal.
of course. But yeah, for the question, the core question there being, which model are being used the most, we think we will likely end up with a page on the website for each app showing what models are being used the most.
Well, we definitely wouldn't mind that. Um, will premium tokens ever be offered in which these tokens are given a higher priority over other tokens like cut the queue type token?
That's an interesting question. I think that's the first time I've heard of a request like that. I would have a. I'm going to respond to the question with a question, which is, in what scenarios are you currently facing issues with the default credits? Because for the most part, OpenRouter doesn't really see rate limits. Again, caveat, Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental, insane demand. We are actively doing our best to kind of figure that out. But outside of that, we typically don't see rate limits from our providers. We ask them not to rate limit us so that we have more capacity for our users. Unless you are specifically limiting to like the smaller providers or the more, edge KC providers, for example, Samba Nova or Grok, who are very high throughput, but obviously will have less capacity because they're a very specialized business. Generally speaking, you shouldn't really be struggling to get a successful request out of popular models. So I think we haven't really thought about anything like that.
So
Having
your
kind of
solution is just to make it work instead of charging more and giving a two-tiered service. You want to put fixes in to make it so that it just works when people
exactly
make the
right.
call.
The idea is, have enough providers that capacity is never a problem, that we can route you. The point of OpenRouter is to route you across all these different providers and route you the way you would like. You want to sort by throughput, by price, by
Yeah,
latency. We should have the cell side volume, the cell side capacity to be able to offer that for you.
makes sense. Okay. Um, let's see. We've got more questions coming down the pipeline here. I have a whole bunch and just trying to weed through them as we go.
Mhm.
Someone said, sorry to ask again. They said it wasn't answered clearly. How many tokens per day are we going to get if we top up more than $10 US at Gemini for Gemini 2.5
Right.
Pro?
Yeah, happy to answer this one. I
Experiment.
saw this one. I saw this one bumping around.
Thanks.
OpenRouter's limits on this model, this is what is actively in place. It is 80 requests per day for the AI Studio provider and 80 requests per day for the Vertex provider. That being said, we basically don't have any capacity on Vertex, so you can kind of discount that provider entirely, and we can just talk about AI Studio. With AI Studio, the 80 requests per day is your limit. If you get a 429, that counts as a request. So when you shoot out a request to Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental, and you get a rate limit error from Google, not necessarily from us, because there is so much capacity, there's so
Hmm.
much demand, that'll count against your 80 requests per day. That means I can't really give you a solid answer about how many successful requests you are going to be able to have on 2.5 Pro free. In theory, you could have 80 successful requests. Unfortunately, you could also have 80 failed requests. So it should be somewhere in the realm of 40 to 80, depending on how lucky you get with that capacity. As I mentioned early in the call, this is like priority number one from this morning. I sat the team down and I was like, hey, I'm continuously hearing about issues with 2.5 Pro experimental. We should figure something out. Odds are, we'll do some kind of limiting here to make it so that if you have added $10, you should have some ability to use the model a little bit more than what is currently happening. We don't know how easy that's going to be or how, much leeway leverage we'll have with that. We're also going to go and ask Google to see if they can give us a little bit more free capacity. But Google, with our current limits, is burning a lot of money on this endpoint. So we also just don't really expect this model to exist in its free capacity for very long.
Hmm.
It's going to be. We will see what solution we come up with, but we definitely don't expect free models from Google like this to just continue to exist. So hopefully this problem somewhat goes away in the near future.
Yeah. Well, that makes complete sense. Okay. That one's off. Premium tokens. Can you explain caching for Gemini 2.5 Pro?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Google has their own way of performing caching, right?
Okay.
The way it works is you have to create a cache block separately from the chat requests. The way people typically think about this, right? OpenAI does it automatically. You don't have to spend any extra money to create the cache, and then you just get a discount if you were repeating the same context over and over. With Anthropic, you have to set what's called a cache control breakpoint. You define in your API request, at this point in time, I want to cache everything that I sent above it, and I have to pay a little bit extra money to create the cache. Then
Okay.
going forward in the next 5 minutes, anytime I use that cache, I get a much cheaper 90% discount. With Google, it doesn't happen within the message history context at all. It happens separately. You make a separate API call and say, I want to cache this text, and you define how long the cache should live. So you can say 5 minutes, you can say an hour, you can say a week, but you have to pay for how long that cache stays alive. All of that
Yeah.
being said, the way OpenRouter is going to handle it is going to abstract a separate API call layer user, and we are going to do what Anthropic does. Through OpenRouter, you are going to set cache control breakpoints for your Gemini 2.5 or Gemini 2 Flash caching calls, we will create the cache for you, and we will
Mhm.
charge you what 5 minutes, right? So there is a set fee for creating the cache that is based on how many tokens per how many hours. So if it's 100,000 tokens, there's a price for 100,000 tokens per hour of caching. We will take that and just make it 5 minutes. We will keep the cache alive for 5 minutes and charge the user to create that cache for 5 minutes on the amount of tokens they use. And then from then on, you will get, I think Google's caching discount for reads or sequentially using that cache is a 75% discount. So to reiterate, for OpenRouter users, you will use the Anthropic style cache control breakpoints. You will pay a cache right to have about a 5 minute cache time to live. And from then on forward, every time you use it, we will refresh the cache for you and you will get the 75% token discount from Google.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Another person asks, can OpenRouter request new models to be hosted by their providers?
Yes, we have started doing this a bit more and more, especially as, we onboard newer and newer providers who are smaller providers or coming into the inference market. One of the ways we suggest to get them more traffic is to host a model that doesn't yet exist on OpenRouter. We've had a lot of success with a newer provider called Parasail. Parasail was wonderful. They jumped in the requests and added like 5 or 6 models within the first month of them being on OpenRouter that didn't exist on OpenRouter. We also have a free model provider but it's called Shoots, which is our biggest free model provider. And we have a really good relationship with the team over there. John Durbin, backend lead, you can find him on Twitter. He's been hosting all kinds of new models. And we sometimes reach out to him to host new models. We believe that as we get more and more providers onboarded onto the platform, we are kind of going to be leading the way. Saying, hey, you should host this model. We will get, if not more than one provider hosting that model right away. Or if we find that our users are struggling with capacity on an existing model, we will have the leverage to say, hey, we think a lot of people want to use this. Is anybody else willing to host it on top of the existing providers? And because it's OpenRouter, we can kind of ensure that that is a not a loss, not a money losing operation, which would be the worst case scenario here, that Open to be hosted and it ends up losing money for the provider. They're just not going to host models for us in the future. So we think we're definitely getting there, both on the aspect of hosting new models and on the aspect of adding more sell-side capacity on models that are very popular, don't have enough capacity.
That it's a good answer. So just to clarify, somebody said so Optimus was 4.1 and Quasar was um, 4.5.
They were both early snapshots of 4.1 full, not mini or nano. Quasar was an earlier snapshot, and Optimus was the later snapshot, both of GPT 4.1. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Someone said, yeah, is there uh, some contact info they can get in touch with? I'm thinking they were talking about the large um, purchase transactions.
Yeah, yeah. You can reach out to us at support@openrouter.ai. It's actually, we hadn't publicized that email since we were such a small team, but it is now in our terms of service if you want to go fetch it from there. I am the main person responding to the inbounds on that email. But yeah, if you are a larger customer looking to place a big purchase order, or if you are someone struggling with any kind of billing issues, that's where you can reach out to us. And I try to respond within about 24 hours to all of those requests. But please note, I am, we're a very quickly scaling company, and I'm reaching over 60-ish emails a week alongside all of my responsibilities on Discord, etc. So bear with me if I now get, there's 95 people in here. If all of you send me an email, I probably won't get back to you all within a day, but I will do my best.
No, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to shift a minute here, or I'd like to bring Michael and Adam in for a bit of a roundtable discussion, or as you were, they can ask you some questions. They're two contributors in our community. You guys want to turn your cameras on here? I don't know if you can, or at least turn your mics on. Okay.
Cool. Hey, how's it going?
Hey,
Hey,
hey.
hey.
It's Adam with the fancy background, and that's Michael with not as fancy of a background. So, what do you guys? You guys are pretty busy with Roo Code in both your support roles and general contributions. You guys always seem to have a lot of opinions and questions. So, have at her. This is have the floor.
I think stuff. So I have questions. So one statistic that I'm particularly interested in is tool usage. So
Okay.
in Roo, we pass tool usage stuff in the prompt. I'm curious if you have any insight or can give us any insight eventually to us developers here at Roo. Does it work better if we actually use the tool parameter to pass in tool information? Or is there no difference between passing in the prompt and tool? Because some providers don't explicitly have tool use capabilities or have been trained that way. And behind the scenes, it will pass it in with prompt injection.
That's a very good question. I definitely think this is something that kind of help everybody understand a little bit better. I don't know that we have a good way of tracking that currently, but I do agree that it's a very good question that I don't think anybody's now. Anthropic definitely has an edge here in terms of the legitimate tool calling process of using the tool call messages array and using it the way one might expect, with finish reason being tool call and all that. Well, as far as I'm aware, apps like Roo Code, you're doing it just kind of in context, not necessarily via the standardized tool calling, function calling framework thing. I think that's about all I have to say. We absolutely gathering currently, and it might be a bit tricky with how little data we collect about users and their chat completions and stuff. But it might be interesting to do as kind of like a research study for a week, saying, hey, if you opt in, we're going to be analyzing, what it looks like for tool calling, whether it be, the more standardized way versus how you guys do it. I think it's definitely a good question. My guess, my intuition, based on no data at all, is that the current modern models are more likely going to be better off not using the standard tool calling, like the tool call messages array. And I think the way you all are doing it with in context and pushing the model to do some kind of structured output might work a little better. But that's just a guess. And I think that could rapidly change. For example, GPT-4.1, part of their whole post-training process was specifically about tool calling. And now GPT-4.1 does this standardized tool calling way better than 4.0 did. But it's still iffy at times. And maybe in one generation it'll be, maybe in two generations it'll be really good. But yeah, I think that's a very good problem we should try to solve for sure.
Michael, do you have any questions?
I had two questions. One was from the chat, and it was about the competitors to OpenRouter. Requesty is diverging in a different direction, and they're doing some prompt interception rewriting. Are there any plans for that? And I'll follow up with the second question afterwards.
Yeah, we've been keeping an eye on Requesty. I've been very impressed with what they've been doing. They're also a very small team, putting out a very cool product. They've got really awesome visualizations and analytics, observability features. We think is really neat. We're definitely inspired by what they're doing.
Yeah.
My gut instinct to prompt interception is the market for users that are okay with that is smaller than we would be comfortable with. We could build that out as an opt-in feature, but I also just don't think that it is always going to be obvious or easy to improve upon a prompt. Like, how do you determine which prompts need improvement, and how are you doing that improvement? Do you lose details when you try to improve a prompt? Does it end up creating a code change that you didn't want, right? There seems to be a lot of open questions about that. And if you aren't, an open source platform or very clear about how it's working, that feels more black boxy to me than anything OpenRouter is currently doing. So that would probably just be a change in how we think about the features we offer our users.
And the follow-up question.
It was a personal question about the cooperation between you and Hugging Face. I see there's one model on right now. Are there plans to allow any other models, or is that something Hugging Face is more keeping closer to themselves?
I was not around for when this relationship with Hugging Face began. It's my understanding that Hugging Face at one point was offering serverless inference endpoints. They kind of shifted away from doing that themselves to now partnering with pretty much all the providers that are on OpenRouter now offer serverless inference through Hugging Face, and they have their own little SDK and API for it as well, which is pretty neat. The current Hugging Face model that exists on OpenRouter is free, but because it's low usage, and the way Hugging Face is charging us is like for the GPU minutes it costs to run the inference there. As far as I understand, this is not something that they're actively working on. It's not really they are pushing in any way. It's kind of an old, we are grandfathered into some old inference that they were doing. And honestly, odds are we will probably stop offering that model because we're eating the cost on it currently. That doesn't mean that we don't have a great relationship with Hugging Face. They are obviously a core part of the industry, and a lot of the open source models we have link directly to a Hugging Face. If you fetch the weights, there's always going to be a link from the OpenRouter model page to go to Hugging Face. And they're very useful for us for onboarding open source models, since we can grab a lot of details from them directly. And like all of our model slugs, if you notice, match the Hugging Face names. So yeah, I think that about covers it.
Okay. Adam, you have another question? Adam's a local LLM guy, by the way. He's
I'm a local LLM guy, so
passionate about
that's
this.
part of my tool calling thing too. So I was curious because Llama has the ability to know whether or not the local LLMs do tool calling through an array or not, and you pass it in an array, and if they don't support it, they'll pass it through as a prompt and stuff. Anyway, one
Interesting,
maybe a little tangential question. It might not even be profitable. Have y'all thought about hosting MCPs at all, and or memory stuff?
Okay. Can you walk me through what the world would look like if OpenRouter offered a memory stuff? Or like you're talking about hosting. I understand the concept of hosting our own MCP servers so that users don't have to do that themselves. I can talk about that for a little bit. I'd like the memory thing a little bit more. If you want to share with me how you think that might work.
Oh, we found a topic he's hot about.
Personally, don't use a memory bank. I looked at them; they seem like really complicated. So that would be the use case of this video. You would offer something like Mem0 or something that you could add to query, maybe provide a little bit of semantic search in it, maybe not quite a vector database.
Sure.
I don't. The shape in my mind is kind of blobulous because there is research papers on memory banks, and we have at least probably 10 memory banks that people have put on top of Roo, and people are still actively playing with them and stuff. So I was just curious if there's industrial strength memory banks that we can't host ourselves on our own machine, that a service provider like you, who has LLM ops and ML ops experience, would make it better for everybody.
Yeah, This is a great question. I mean, I think especially with ChatGPT rolling out, memory across all conversations,
Yeah.
it's becoming more and more a part of the conversation. So, two things here. MCPs were very, very heavily discussed within OpenRouter. Our take is that we don't really need to do anything there. We don't necessarily believe that there's a lot more. We don't necessarily believe that there's a lot of value we can add by doing anything other than allowing MCP to be called when you're using OpenRouter, right? Generally speaking, it's just like tool calling, and it works through OpenRouter. We might not necessarily take on the extra effort of hosting our own MCP servers. We believe there's a lot of really cool startups and people doing cool things. Like I think it's Composio that's doing their like big MCP thing. Obviously, there's a lot of like MCP marketplace stuff going on. We're gonna let some folks figure it out, I think, and see. Google's taking advantage of it now. OpenAI is hopping on the trend. If there is really something that is obviously a value add that should come to OpenRouter, we'll reconsider. But at this time, MCP works with OpenRouter. There's no issue. You can use it. There just isn't necessarily extra MCP stuff on the platform. Jumping to the question I'm more interested in, memory. I think it is obvious, or at least, let me rephrase that. I think it is pretty clear that memory is a strong use case, especially long-term memory that you can swap between models, between use cases. Currently, it feels that memory is kind of a vendor lock-in tool. OpenAI is putting memory out, and if you use ChatGPT and you have a lot of memory, odds are you can't just switch to Claude. That kind of goes against the OpenRouter philosophy of change a single line of code and you get to use any LLM you want. We think there absolutely is value add in doing something like you were suggesting, where you can take your memory with you to any model, to any API, to any shape, any blob, any section of that memory. There's absolutely something there. What that looks like, what the time frame is, how we implement it, and honestly, what the pricing looks like, because it's probably not going to be cheap. Maybe it's a premium feature or something like that. All very much up in the air, but I do think that what you are thinking about makes a lot of sense. We do some of these things already, allowing web search to happen on every model, allowing soon PDF uploads on every model. If we can have personalized memory on every model, that sounds like an awesome feature. So how we do that and when, up in the air, but we like where your head's at. We like what you're thinking.
Anything you can tell us that's not secret about what provider you're going to use to tokenize, JSONify PDFs, and what the latency might be?
That's a good question. I don't quite know about latency, but we use a small like PDF to JSON package currently, and we're going to offer that just like a basic open source PDF to JSON thing alongside. If you want to choose between the two, you'll have PDF to JSON, or you'll have Mistral OCR, which is their new like AI based OCR.
Scientific papers and maybe things with a lot of tables in them and stuff like that.
Yeah. We think both will be good. We've been using PDF to JSON with not a lot of complaints before, but obviously it's not cutting edge. It's what has been used to parse PDFs for a very long time. So we'll be offering Mistral OCR alongside that. And there's obviously going to be added latency, especially with the OCR, but it probably shouldn't be that much unless you're putting in 20, 50 pages of PDF. It might be some extra amount of time.
Cool.
Okay. Let's see. Are you you got to head out here, or you have time for some more questions? Or
I can do one or two more questions. Find me some good ones, and then
okay,
drop off.
I'm gonna
get back to work.
Oh, what? This isn't work? Come on. Okay. What is enable input-output logging with the 1% discount used for? Just for analytics, or are you planning on training your own models with this?
So I can give some context. OpenRouter has, in your privacy settings, the ability to let us store your prompts and completions, basically. That data currently isn't being used for anything. We just have it, and we give you 1% discount. I was not around when that decision was made to offer that. I don't really have much context on why, but I don't believe our intention is to train a model. I don't really know what our intention is. It's definitely not anything malicious. If that data is ever used, obviously we would remove all kinds of personal identifying information, make sure that it's completely anonymized. But there's a lot of useful cases for a data set like that, right? If we were to open source it for research purposes, or use it to fine tune, or use it to improve our model routing, things are possible. I think there aren't any current plans, and again, it is a completely opt-in thing. But yeah, not currently being used for anything other than offering focus discount, and just, data is money nowadays. We try to give you some money back for allowing us to store it, but yeah, no malicious intent, no current plans to train a model or anything like that. But if we do, I'm sure we will tell everybody about it and start using that data.
Okay, I guess we will go with one more question. This needs to be a gooder. Let's see. Why is my mic cutting off? No. Was it my mic cutting off? Okay,
No,
that was you. Right now,
yeah.
I see that. It was only cutting out, but it didn't kill you. It was fine.
I have a fancy mic, so I was concerned. I think I was.
Look, I bought this fancy one for $25 on Amazon. It seems to work just fine, and it glows pretty colors.
I like the glow.
Okay. Right now, you support sending a single prompt to multiple models. I would love to see a group model. So send a request to one, and then I guess return the best result.
Interesting.
As a follow-up, I think somebody also asked about the rules-based routing. So if you had a model group and wrote some rules about when to send what to where, if that's in scope.
Yeah, that's absolutely in scope. We partner with Not Diamond for our current auto router. I just got distracted by this app you did, Hans. This is great. This is so good. We use Not Diamond to power our auto router. Not Diamond knows what model is best for a specific prompt and will route you to that dynamically. There's a lot Not Diamond would allow us to do that we can kind of add in as a feature to OpenRouter, including rules-based prompting, and just kind of defining your own subset of models be interested in routing between. So that's absolutely in scope. To talk a little bit about like multiple models for a single prompt, the current OpenAI chat completion spec doesn't really have a way to, other than the end parameter, which is now deprecated and OpenRouter doesn't support it to begin with. There isn't necessarily a good way to do that, but we think, as we are talking about supporting the Responses API, the Responses API has the kind of response content as an array. For the example of, ChatGPT, 4o's image output, for a single response, you might get some text and an image, and that would be in an array for the messages output. If we were to do something like this, where you select, give me a completion from Gemini 2.5, give me a completion from Grok 3, give me a completion from Sonnet 3.7, all in one request, the API shape would probably change and require something like that. But it's an interesting idea, and I'm kind of spitballing here because I don't think anybody's ever necessarily thought of it. But it's definitely an interesting idea. The way we have discussed this kind of thing before, with regards to kind of how the functionality would work, is kind of like a feedback endpoint to collect data on a model. If you were to opt into this system, this is just all a theoretical, right? If you were to opt into the system, you would send us a prompt and we would give you back multiple model responses, and then you would have to choose which one you liked. For the example of kind of how this would work on an end-to-end basis, if Roo Code partnered with us to use this feedback endpoint, you would kind of at random choose for a user's request to go to this endpoint. Probably it would require user opt-in because there would be extra data being shared here. But if the user opted into this feedback process, they would send a coding question or a coding prompt. Roo Code would get back 3 different responses, 2 or 3 different responses, whatever it is. They would show it to the user in some UI that requires the user to vote or give feedback. Roo Code could get that feedback, but mostly OpenRouter would then take that feedback and display it publicly or share it with the model providers, or use that data in some way too. So I've gone on a little tangent there, but I think that kind of thing is theoretically possible. I don't know that the use case is quite there for the end user, but we believe that that might be something that happens down the line for like a feedback API. The user wouldn't necessarily pay 3 times the price. It would be something OpenRouter offers to collect data. You get a free completion if you give us feedback on which one of the multiple models you liked.
Thank you very much for answering that question and all the questions that the community here sent your way. You were very thorough, and yeah, thanks for joining us last minute. We really do appreciate it.
Of course.
So
thank you guys. Shout out to the Roo Code community. I'm around here on the server. If you report questions or problem with OpenRouter, please feel free to ping me. And also join us on the Discord server as well, so we can keep in the loop. Thanks, Hans, for inviting me.
no problem. Take it easy.
Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, let's pull Matt. Matt, you want to join up here? Let's see. Do we have another guy? How about in Element? I don't know if you guys have seen, but we recently rolled out some cool new icons here for auto approve. Makes it much easier to flick auto approve on and off instead of going all the way up to the top of the screen there. You can mouse over them and see what's going on. Oh, look at that. In Element has joined us.
Hey,
Welcome.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. How you doing?
Good. I want to thank you for your contribution the other
Oh,
day.
you're
I
welcome.
think it was like 1 a.m. or something my time, and somehow it ended up, and I complained about something, and you said you were going to do it after your next project or something, and I said, yeah, that's what everybody says. I think I might have said, and you said you were going to do it, and then a few days later it popped up there.
It's funny. I think you would actually. There's one other feature that you asked, that you said you wanted to have happen like a month ago, and I said the same thing. And then sometimes you procrastinate and forget about things. But sometimes something's just itching you the same way as it's itching someone else. And I was feeling the same way as you about that little panel. So sometimes you just say, I'm gonna go in and fix that one thing. So yeah.
Well, we really do appreciate that contribution, because I think that it makes a big difference. It looks way better.
Yeah, I
Right
think
here
there's
too.
a few little things that, we can all as a community chip in and polish them up a little bit. There's so much happening in the code base that I think, it's very, very easy for clutter to happen, for things to get in disarray. And I would just suggest that if anyone else is looking to contribute, these little opportunities to jump in and prune, or they're everywhere. So it's definitely something I encourage other people to do.
Do you guys have any question? Anyone have any software dev job opportunities? I need a job, and maybe someone here has resources, connects, or ideas. I think that I'll tell you guys this much. At Roo Code, we are actively looking for, here, let's look at this. We are looking for some new team members. And how we're going about that is we're asking people to basically get involved in making a pull request. Let's see what you're made of. Let's see what kind of energy you've got. This project requires a unique skill set. I'm new to this world, but I guess it's sort of the startup world that on top of the the AI hype and race going on, we're looking for team members that really dig into the code base and are willing to work with. Basically, you'll be running with your laptop, going for a jog with your laptop, because no one person on our team fits a uh, exact role. They're very, very much changing as as the day progresses. We go, okay, this needs to get handled. This needs to get handled. Whoever has some workload often handles it, though they don't ever get me to handle the deep dive into coding. That's they don't want to break, really. So yeah, there's a job opportunity. A Roo engineer. I don't want to ruin anything. Okay, let's look at what I've got going on here. I have been trying to get this bounce around. I mean, that's pretty wild. It wasn't quite a one shot, but um, yeah, this is what we got. It wasn't that difficult. So if this is of any use to you, you can always make that yourself. Does anyone have any questions for these various community contributors, or I think our lead dev is in here, Matt, so we can always bug him. When can we expect to see Boomerang Orchestrator mode as a built-in mode? Uh-oh, they put me on the spot. Here. I'm thinking that 1 to 2 weeks is my guesstimate. That is absolutely not from a roadmap. That's me making it up. Just based on what I'm understanding is going on in our dev team, um, we're hoping to put out Boomerang tasks 1.5 or perhaps 2.0 within the next week or two with some significant improvements. But that being said, that's just me making a bit of a guesstimate, and it could work out better or potentially worse. So, any contributions we get from the community to help improve Boomerang tasks 100% would be appreciated. One of the biggest areas where we're a bit backlogged is edge case bugs that need to be squashed. We do have some issues we're working through, like terminals being recognized, and our responses with apply diff, or how we handle apply diff with models that don't handle it as well, like Gemini 2.5 experimental and sometimes preview. But yeah, it's one of those things where your guys' contributions make a world of difference, and we're very much a piece of software that's written by you guys. So, what is the Boomerang method I hear about? Okay, I think that's a great question. Here, let's start from scratch here. I'm going to um, discard all the files. Let's see what happens. This Boomerang method, what I've done here is I have implemented a mode called Boomerang mode. I picked it up on our website. Oh, that 404. Right here at our docs, there's some instructions showing, there's a video showing how it works and then some instructions that follow. Anyways, the mode is down here at the bottom. I clicked here and I copied this, and then I brought it over into my project modes, pasted it, and now I have Boomerang mode. Here I went and here I will show you what the prompt is. I'm going to take this and prompt create a minimal Next.js app that displays a logo image bouncing around the screen edge to edge like DVD screensaver. Use Framer Motion for animation and Tailwind CSS for layout. Keep the animation continuous and reactive to window size changes. Use logo.png right here. No extra UI or interactivity needed. So I'm in Boomerang mode. You can see I'm using 4.1, which is here. I'm not just regular 4.1. And let's hit go and see what Boomerang tasks does. So first it's going, hey, I understand this. And now it's creating a subtask. So it's not, the context is not happening in the main task. You have a parent task and it feeds out. Oh, here, I guess I can pull that screen up. It feeds out into a subtask, and that subtask completes and reports back to the parent task. I'll show you right here. Here are the instructions we have. Hey, look at that. Found an error. So set up Tailwind CSS and Framer motion in the current Next.js project. And then it has some instructions, and then it says signal completion by using the attempt completion tool. If you keep watching here, I'm going to answer another question. I just switched from Copilot to Roo. It's great as is, but it's very enticing to try out the various community extensions and custom-made mods. Rooflow, Roo Commander, Spark, Taskmaster, and many more. I assume they all do similar things, but it's very daunting to even get started with them all. Might there eventually be some effort to bring something like this natively to Roo? Or at least documentation to help us make sense of it all? That's a great question. Yes, 100%. This is something that we want to bring to Roo. We are working on bringing these more complex orchestrating experiences, but we're very wary about putting them out to you guys without testing them thoroughly and really documenting them. And as soon as we do release any of them, it's going to require a lot of overhead to continually tweak them, working with different models. So at this point, it's more of a manpower thing. We just don't have the internal manpower to put it out, and nobody has made a pull request with something of this nature that we've seen to perform at the level that we wanted to. Back here on my main task, you can see we went out subtask instructions, and then it popped back with the subtask results. Now it's sending out another subtask. That's why it's Boomerang. It's going out, it's coming back. Now, answering to your question again, we do have evals, which we've been working on. They are available in our main repository if you want to experiment. They can be rather pricey, but we're adding some functionality to our eval process to allow us to, when testing and implementing a memory bank orchestration workflow, to see how well it performs. And once we get that done, and then we test it on workflows, we can start putting them out there because we'll be confident as to the quality which we're outputting. At this point, we really don't want to put something out that's half cut. And I'm not saying that these community efforts are half cut. I'm just saying that we need to test it in-house repeatedly and consistently to make sure that it has the kind of output that we think you guys expect from us. And these community projects are often they're done often with a significant amount of self-report, and we want to put the systems in place to measure this consistently and accurately. So,
and I would like to just promote, if I can, maybe not promote. Well, yeah, promote. So those of you who know about Roo Commander, so Jez has his own Discord server now. And it's a very, if y'all weren't around for it, I mean, he was literally changing that orchestration system twice a day, easily. And so he's broken out for, he has a separate Discord server, and it's very active over there. If you like to play around with the really weird experimental orchestration stuff, and you have a taste for it because it's very unstable sometimes, very loopy sometimes, head on over to his Discord server and check it out.
yes,
This is like a hotbed of experimentation for Roo, in my opinion, is orchestration systems right now.
I was talking to Scotty about his Rooflow, and he mentioned this morning that he was looking. Great Scotty Mac said that he's looking for contributors to pick up some of the slack because he's just too slammed to keep up with it. So I don't want to draw away from the the effort we have going into Roo, and I don't think that this will. I think that these community projects have the potential to really evolve the way we work with Roo. So if anyone is really interested in that, he is interested in taking some community contributions. Pandora's box, you said you need to deep dive into Boomerang mode because you didn't quite catch exactly what it aims to do. Okay, I'll explain it slowly instead of just zinging past. What it does is typically you have a one task and it works its way. The context grows. You might switch modes back and forth. And once you start getting close to context limit, we'll lob off some of the earlier context, but ultimately it does not operate the same as a chat that occurs within its original context size. And what Boomerang tasks do is they allow you to have a parent task that breaks your task down into smaller tasks and then send them out to specialized modes to do their thing, and they do their thing. Then they come back with a report, and instead of feeding the entire context from that subtask into the parent task, they just have the this was successful and here's what you need to know about it. So now the parent task can move on to its next task without having a muddied context window. Does that make a little more sense, Pandora's box? What about checkpoints issues? Look, message above. There are so many messages above, and I can't keep track of what's going on. What checkpoint issues are we talking about? A lot of community. Okay, with get disabled. Oh, I have my Boomerang task going. I'm waiting for someone to reply there. I have my Boomerang task going, and I need to say yes. Looks like we're running. That was one shot. And there's it not working. So let's go back and proceed while running. Hit 100%. Oh, it's on 3001. That's why. Oh, same thing. Oh, 3002. It's just making tasks. Yikes. Broken. Okay, more questions? Well, I continue to try to massage this into submission. Are there any plans in the future for reg support and code indexing to reduce token consumption? Yes, absolutely. We have a PR that is active. I need to get around to testing it. Daniel, have you made improvements to it? I have not been following it. That's the guy who is working on indexing. How much the checkpoint takes in terms of megabyte size? I don't really know. My subtasks all have their own checkpoints, and this isn't a very big task. So, doesn't Roo Code already have file summary methods, list with tree setter? Yes, but with code indexing, we can add to that.
And I just want to point out the answer to
Go
that
ahead.
question too, is that it's limited to the languages that are supported by tree setter WASM. And so Eric, I think it was Eric? CC
Yes.
or Eric? I mix those two people up all the time.
Okay.
I think it was Eric added really good Rust support and expanded the queries greatly. So, like I said, we have it, but it just depends on what languages we actually have parsability to.
Makes sense. Okay. So we're on port 3003 now. Just bouncing around. It keeps opening more and more. And okay, I'm gonna put a bit of a stop to this. Let's remove some of these and go to the bottom. Proceed while running, cancel, terminate, and I'm going to go back to the main parent here and say, can you run the app and debug it, please? I'm just going to take a screenshot and see what happens here. There we go. I am using 4.1, playing with it. Okay. We released 3. What did we release? We made a new release this morning, and I'm not even on the ball here. Just going to look that up. The change log was not 3.12. Oh, wow, 3.12.1 as well. We made some minor adjustments, but hopefully meaningful ones. 3.12 added XAI as a provider and exposed reasoning effort options for Grok on OpenRouter. Thank you very much, Klein, for doing that for us. We 100% pulled that in from you, and we appreciate Klein. The diff editing per config profile is now a thing. Let's see. Let's look at that. Enable. There we go. This allows you to enable and disable diff editing. So with a model like Gemini 2.5 preview, we're seeing it doesn't like diffs consistently. One way to deal with that, especially if you're not paying for it, is to disable diffs. But if you disable diffs, it's really annoying to then switch back to another model and have diffs disabled. So now we've made it, API profile level. We added a search bar to mode and profile selection dropdown. Oh. Guess that's at the bottom there. I can't really see it right now. Well, let's pop another one out here and see if we can. Oh, look at that. You can search in there. Thank you, Gins. Hey, how we end up in thinking. It's not what we wanted. We wanted to be in 4.1. I'll be putting out release notes shortly after this. Can we get some more on mic here? Let's talk about local models. Adam, that's a nod to you. People seem interested in those. The main question people ask up front, what is the most popular question you get, Adam?
Most popular question I get is, which LLM model is the best? And like I've confided to Hannes and some other people, I feel like I'm being a curmudgeon and being an old man and saying none of the local LLMs are any good. But that is my opinion as a coder. So nothing you have is going to, compare to any of the hosted models whatsoever. Having said that, if you're not doing one-shots, if you're not doing crazy Boomerang stuff like Hannes is doing here, if you're sitting down and you're coding and you're having to refactor and stuff, the best model right now is run the largest version of Quinn Coder 2.5 that you can run. In a nutshell. If you can, if you're on non-Mac system, you can turn on KB caching. That'll speed things up a little bit. And if you have a Mac, try to grab the MLX version of Quinn Coder.
Yeah. Somebody asked, how are you guys funded? Assuming the jobs you guys have listed would be paid positions, how would those be funded? We are funded. We have we have financial backers. I guess you could say venture capitalist funding is how it goes in this industry. So we do have a war chest, and we are looking to grow that. If anyone's wondering, this is a common question. Are you guys going to charge? No, we don't have any plans at this point to charge. You guys as a community have done an awesome job contributing to this project, and the areas we're looking to monetize are related to enterprise support, not taking advantage of you guys and charging you for what you made. Root chest, thank you. Still not bouncing. It moved. Yeah, look at that. Okay, well, it is not bouncing. Oh, it said, do I see any console logs here? Enterprise model is great. You're killing it. Nice podcast. Oh, nice to see you, Yellowbat. Yellowbat was a fellow mod over at Klein. I think he still is. But I started in this space by volunteering as a mod over at our wonderful, I guess, the maker of us initially. I one-shotted it using modes. Gemini, okay, fine. He wants me to try this. Let's try this, and let's one-shot this with... Someone else want to talk? Well, I one-shot this. Hey. Michael,
All right.
Adam, in Element.
I'll give some more cool suggestions. So people are asking about various pieces of the code all the time. This sounds like heresy, but one of the best ways to learn about Roo code is to go ask Copilot. Hey,
how is that?
Because the free version doesn't cost you anything if you already have a GitHub account. I realize some people don't have a GitHub account. People may be reluctant to get a GitHub account for various reasons. But if you do, you can just go into the repo, click on the little Copilot tab, and enter a chat. You can say, someone just asked, like, what's tree sitter wasm? You can just go ask Copilot, hey, can you show me how and where we use tree sitter wasm in the code base? And it will gladly go do it and give you hyperlinks into your chat discussion that will jump you directly to the code in GitHub. And it works. It's a very good explanation. And like I said, as our code base grows, it's harder and harder to onboard new devs and stuff in here. And that, to me, that's just a great shortcut. I am not a TypeScript developer. I am becoming a TypeScript developer because of Roo now. And a big part of that is using general chat models in general, like Claude is my favorite. And then, like I said, using Copilot to spelunk the code base to quickly get me to where I need to see the thing that I want to know about and or change.
There seems to be various venture-backed teams all working off fundamentally the same code base, Klein, Roo, Kylo code, perhaps even others. Any thoughts on this? Well, Klein is doing a great job, and we have a slightly different vision on how we want to carry out our development process. And as a result, we are separate. I think that we often work off each other and motivate one another, to be honest. Whereas if we were all on the same team, it wouldn't work quite like that. At least that's my thought. And then Kylo code, they, I haven't seen them a lot. I met some of their team this last week, and they seem like a pretty solid group of people. I think that the differences they've applied a few differences to Roo. And taken in, I think, some changes from Klein as well that we haven't. But I think that they will differentiate themselves as time goes on. So that's my thoughts on it.
Could you
realistically, the customer base in the long run for all three of us and others are probably people that aren't using software like this yet, and or maybe other companies outside of our sphere, Cursor, Windsurf, I don't know, that have the real market share.
If I can cut in, I was actually going to ask a question. Now, we obviously don't know, we're not psychic, we don't know what's in the mind of the other teams, but from your perception, how do you think that they're thinking about this differently from the Roo team?
You mean Klein and Kylo and whoever else is?
Yeah, you kind of said that the Roo vision is different. Maybe elaborate on that, where you think this is going different from the other teams.
I think that at the end of the day, we all want to figure out a way to make money, 100%. Our birth was the result of changes to the Klein code base that were not initially taken in, and then we diverged. And since there wasn't a lot of us, we started to take on PRs from the community, and it sort of picked up. I think this week we're looking to probably hit about 30 different community contributors. Is what we're going to be drawing from, and it's challenging to deal with community PRs because you get code in different flavors and different directions, and there's once you start accepting PRs, you have to learn to say you have to take time and effort into saying no sometimes, and also you get a PR that's 90% of the way there. Well, you don't just say no, bring it back. You try to work with them, sometimes even making changes ourselves to help it fit into the overall direction of Roo. And so there is patient work that's required with different people from all over the world. And we don't look at that as a negative thing. We like it. I like meeting people. I get to deal with a lot of people from different backgrounds and different cultures. And it can feel like it's slowing things down if you look at it as a negative thing. But I know that we don't look at it like that. So this is, I think, our direction really involves including the community, and not for the sake of profiting off the community. We would like to profit, but we're not interested in taking advantage of the community. So I don't know exactly how they see all of this, but I know that we definitely take more community contributions than any of the Klein forks. Than Klein itself, for that matter. So, yeah, good question. Are there any plans to decompose the Roo core into standalone modules or packages similar to how CodeGen operates, and so that it can be run independently outside VS Code? That is something that would be born out of a PR ultimately. We don't have internal plans to do that, but we aren't necessarily adverse to it either.
There are plans afoot by various people in the community. And CTE, for example, has a PR out there right now that does some modularization and stuff. I call them the JetBrains crew, the people that actually want to make a JetBrains plugin. They've done some stuff not related to JetBrains at all, but modularizing where all of our install files are, and removing a lot of relative pathing in TypeScript and replacing it with I think they're called source maps or something. There's a main file that says, at source equals this folder basically and stuff. And so there's a lot of little things going on to modularize out the code. But CTE had some kind of bigger plans for making a monorepo, for example,
yeah,
and trying to modularize it, because we have Roo proper, we have evals now, and if people haven't heard, there's a CLI that we might possibly have, so we could run Roo code completely from the command line to do stuff. So
yeah, that looks pretty neat. I haven't tried it, but I know that is definitely on our radar. Somebody put it out yesterday, I think.
Yeah, there's another cool thing too that got mentioned like a long time ago that I forgot about. Someone wrote a Roomote. So literally a socket server that you can send commands into Roo to do stuff. I think it's very rudimentary, but I'd forgotten about it a long time ago. Then I saw a bunch of, I was going through support, and it's like, oh, someone's like talking about that in the looking for group channel. Someone else mentioned it again. Some completely different person mentioned it again and stuff. So there are little pieces and parts of modularization out there. So it's kind of cool.
I will say that from my assessment of the code base right now, from as I've been digging in, it's very monolithic right now, and there's a bit of brittleness in how it's monolithic, and this actually isn't on the Roo team, because if I do all the Git blames, it's like a lot of the Klein stuff, and no shade on the Klein team either. This is just when you build out something this fast, it happens. But
well, and they were born out of a hackathon. So
yeah. Yeah, this is just move fast and break things.
No, yeah,
And things
100%.
kind of sometimes have to stabilize before you can modularize. I do think it's going to take a little while before we get to that point. But there's a lot of kind of foundational improvements that are clearly happening in the code base and need to keep happening before these things can kind of get in motion.
No, that's a great point. Deploy now. This is not one-shotting the way that I wanted it to. 100%. I'll just proceed while running and see what happens. And then I need to pull up the questions. We've got a few more questions. Those are all OpenRouter questions, and they are gone. Okay, I don't have any other questions. My bot is not producing what I want it to. Can you turn on checkpoints? I want to see how much the checkpoints are on. There's just not a lot of size. It's a small project, so yeah. Let's see. I'm not really talking to this thing very much to tell it what's going on. I'm just sending it a picture from time to time. We've got time for a few more questions. Let's get them while they're hot. Could you touch on MCP tools, please? What is the best way to use MCP tools with Roo? Should we ask it to use a tool on each prompt, or is there a way to reference the tools that it should use for each task? When using an MCP, the tools have descriptions. Those descriptions, when you have that MCP enabled, are included in the system prompt. So the existence and of those tools and how they are to be used is, that information is right up there with the built-in tools in the system prompt. So the large language model, if it is tuned to handle that, will be able to pick them out. That being said, it doesn't seem to be something that is always successful. So in my personal use, the one that I've used the most is related to searching documentation. I will simply, in my initial prompt, say, okay, here's what I want to get done. Here's the libraries, the library I'm using for this specific thing. Use this tool before going forward with it. And then Boomerang mode will, launch into a specific mode, make the MCP calls, get information, build a plan, come back to the parent task. You're welcome. Okay. Michael, do you have anything that you want to say before we head out here in 5 minutes?
No, I'm good for now. I've actually been on the phone most of this time.
Well, I mean, you
Work never
disappeared on
stops.
us for a week. I think you went on a vacation or something silly.
Yes.
And you came back to sort of a number of changes.
Oh yeah, things change so fast. I'm still in the catching up process.
Let's take a look at some of the latest changes. Well, we're there. Okay, we have update notes. I do not have yesterday's update in here yet. Let's scroll through these, and if anyone has questions about them, Let me know. Can Boomerize be customized the same way custom modes are created? Yes, Boomerang mode is just a mode that I built through some trial and error, and it is intended to be a usable mode, but not the end iteration. I am a strong believer that a Boomerang mode, the parent Boomerang orchestrator, should be and can be customized to your specific needs on a project. So you can start with the base level one that I've provided here in Boomerang tasks down at the bottom, and then you can tweak it on a case-by-case basis. You don't have to, though. I often don't change it. Depends on the size of the project I'm working on. I'd love to hear people's experience with 4.1. I'd love to hear about, how have you guys been using it? In Element, have you tried it out?
I was using Quasar Alpha quite a bit for coding, and I quite liked it. I haven't used the production version yet. I still prefer Gemini 2.5, and I've got a bunch of Google credits that I'm burning right now, so I can't recommend enough that if you are able to sign up for a trial on Google Cloud, they give you, I think it's $300 worth of credits, so it lasts a little while. So I'm still using 2.5, but I was using Quasar for a bit. I was quite impressed. For my money, I don't think Optimus performs as well, and I think that might be 4.1 mini. But it's good. It's good. I don't think it's quite there yet. I don't think it's 2.5 destroying.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting the way 2.5 just came up and made it happen. I'm very, very excited for the actual final release.
I joined a little bit late, and I don't know if it was mentioned, but there's been some discussion in the chats today that 2.5 might have degraded a little bit.
Yes,
And I
but
don't know if anyone if this is go ahead. Go ahead.
2.5 experimental, I'm convinced goes back and forth. I mean, it's experimental. I imagine they're playing with us a bit. Not really playing with us. They're doing testing various I guess iterations of 2.5 to gather data. That's what Google does. They gather data, tons of data, and that gives me hope for the eventual outcome when we deal with 2.5 Pro.
Bunch of joking on other forums or other channels, the Discord, Slack, all kinds of places, that the reason that experimental changes so much is that they pull all the old projects out of the Google graveyard and train them on the model to see does it improve responses or does it remove accuracy from the responses. Because Google has it's called the Google graveyard. It's literally a place, and there's over 100 projects in there that Google started up, released to the public, and then killed. Not minor programs either, like an entire 3D VR multiverse that was around for a year and then disappeared.
Yeah. In case anybody's been watching, 4.1 did orchestrate a successful, attempt at building a DVD bouncing around Roo logo. I did not change the submodes, so the child tasks, the children were running, I think, 3.7 thinking with a low thinking budget. So it isn't really that good of a test as to what was going on. I really just had it running to keep something on the screen, playing around while we chatted. If you guys are interested in future sessions, open office podcasts, if you're interested in seeing some specific demo, please reach out to me and let me know. We're going to close her down now. And thank you all for coming. We really do appreciate you and look forward to working with you as a community. Thank you.